Hi guys, here is hopefully you've had a chance to sort of play around with some basic abstract shapes. Going to get a little bit more structured and practice some color and value and temperature changes that we'll be using for the different items in our fruit bowl. First I'm going to email you a PDF of this little chart that hopefully you can print out and use and transfer a drawing of it onto a piece of watercolor paper. We're going to be doing, this is basically what we'll be going for. And once again, this is going to represent my apple. This is going to represent the bowl. In the case of the big image, I realized I was being confused because I had a mug, or was a vase, whatever you want to call it, for the little practicing sheet. So anyways, it's the same idea. So a couple quick things about transferring. If you want to transfer this to a piece of paper, hopefully you realize if you have some sort of a light box, you can use that, but that, not very many people have a light box. Another approach is just to, especially for this simple grid, is to flip it over and put a little graphite on the back side. And then flip that over to your watercolor paper. And then pressing down, I'll be forcing a little bit of that graphite on the back onto the watercolor paper. So then you've sort of at least transferred your drawing. You can do it that way. So more on that in class if that's confusing, because I know it can be. It took me a while to sort of figure out if I wanted to transfer a drawing, and if so, how. So I have my my 12 round brush and some water and my paint, and I think like we already did, I'm going to start with a kind of a light watery. I'm going to try to explain a little bit more in class about how watery or how not watery, because the term light can be confusing if you're talking about a light amount of pigment or a light value, or so it gets confusing. But to be specific, I'm going to mix up a watery mix, a pretty watery mix of a light valued orangey red. And I'm going to mix up enough, and I'm going to paint that over this entire rectangle, this entire pseudo apple. And I'm using my 12, and I have a decent amount of paint in here. I'm going to be painting a little sideways, so I'm a little. So this is obviously too big a shape for me to sort of do with just one load of paint. So when I start getting low on that first load, I go get some more, and I'm still doing this overlapping thing, and I'm wanting to bring in a little bit more of wet color so that it keeps mixing, and I keep getting this little bit of, it's often called a bead of color and water along this lower row. But I want to be conscientious of a couple things, that it's the rate that it's drawing is going to be want to try to keep the whole thing as consistently wet and moist as I can. So as I keep coming down and wanting to paint this bigger shape, if I start running out, if it starts getting too dry up here, I can always bring in a little bit more. And as long as I have it angled, very important, having it angled so the water is and color is running down, I can keep overlapping that bead, overlapping all sides over here. And when I say overlapping, basically that means if I wanted to keep painting this shape, I wouldn't all of a sudden start down in this corner right here. I don't think that's going to show up because I'll be going quick enough, but and I'll take care of it right now by just watering it down. This notion of this bead, I remember being really hard for me to figure out because it looked so simple, and every time I painted, I felt like it wasn't working, and partly you need to have a brush that will introduce enough water. You need to make a mix that is watery enough for it to even do that. And you need to sort of be brave and realize that it will hold quite a bit before that would actually drip down. As I've been talking and blabbing, I note that it's drying more up here in the upper parts of this shape. So I would not want to go back. I could go back into there if I really needed to. But at the beginning, I really tried to keep it wet so that the whole thing would sort of flow down like that. I could go back if something was sort of weird. I could go back and say, oh heck, I'm gonna need to make the entire shape and distribute the water and the pigment evenly again. That can sort of create its own things. I think I had a few things like that on the other video. So that was a watery mix of reddish orange. This next one is going to be a watery mix of peacock blue. And once again, I want to mix up plenty of color. It's better to plenty of paint here. It's better to have a little bit too much than to run out, especially if you're trying to keep it in a nice flat wash like this. So being following my own advice, I think I'll make a little bit more. So that's pretty watery, that's fine. I think it's a little bit more important to have enough than be so worried about if it's the right concentration. Either way, let's paint. Quit talking. Once again, upper left. And across. So there's already sort of a little bit of a bead going on. Let's do more. I try to be clear about the technique without being too militant or too intense about making sure everything is perfect, because you know, part of it should it's just sort of having fun and figuring out what happens. So so yeah, see how there's this bead of water right there? It's not, because of the sizing in the paper, it's not going to go anywhere. What could happen now is, if I am sort of talking and taking too long, kind of like I'm doing, it could start drying kind of unevenly. And once again, if I just feel like, you know, I want to make sure that it doesn't dry unevenly, I'm going to introduce some at the top and just let it fall down, because you can see it's sort of a little bit uneven. When the paint won't move, it means there's not enough water for it to move. The paper's not wet enough for it to move. This is often referred, sometimes,